Teachers or professors of Reddit, what is the most elaborate cheating scheme you've stumbled upon? 2 girls wearing hijabs communicating with each other via Bluetooth during multiple exams. They've won. Only until the exam rooms start implementing signal jammers. Here's a good one. Professor prints out all 150 exams the day before test and leaves them on his desk accidentally. He suspects a student came in during office hours and stole an exam to fill in at home. Sure enough, he counts 149 exams instead of rewriting the entire test and cutting his losses. He goes to the paper cutter and chops off a 1/4 inch from the bottom margin of all 149 exams. When the test was over, he straightened the stack of exams and up pops the one that was stolen the day before. Well, my high school teacher cheated on his wife with a student. Go on. He had an affair with one of the students over 2 years. He was married with 6 kids. Had an exam worth 50% of our grade. Prof was quite strict about pencils, water bottles, etc. We asked her what the deal was and she regaled us with a story about a Chinese girl who wore a beautiful long dress with Chinese writing all over her dress. Turns out the girl had sewn patches with the answers to the test onto her dress. Not 100% sure if it actually happened or just a deterrent for would-be cheaters. A guy I used to know had a master in econometrics. He did consulting work for various levels of government. He got a letter offering work from a city about 600 or 700 miles away, asking for answers to a number of hypothetical questions. After studying it for a while, it struck him that he was not looking at a consulting contract. He was looking at a take-home exam in econometrics. He wrote to the various units and commuting distance of the return address, explaining the situation. One of the replies read, "Feel free to do the work. For your usual fee, we recommend that you cash the check as soon as humanly possible. We would take it as a kindness if you would use the following variable names in response to each of the questions." He did all of the above. A couple of weeks later he got the following letter from the same professor. Got time. It's not to elaborate, but I randomize all of the questions on my quizzes. I tell my students to take them alone. Every semester, I get quizzes and they have all the right answers in the wrong order. They work together and don't even take time to look at the questions. What was the most popular typeface of the 1960s? The French Revolution. Edit, the answer is Helvetica. For an assessment, I gave in an essay that wasn't complete but was what I had at the time. Then went and spent the rest of the day completing it. Found the teacher. Apologized and said that I had accidentally given her a draft. I was a right nerd and got away with it without a problem. Your teacher knew. They were just looking for an excuse not to give you a bad grade. Not a teacher, but during their standard grade exam some female students at my old school wrote answers and things to remember on their legs, then put tights and a skirt on over them. By pulling them tight they could see through and read the answers, and for obvious reasons no invigilator is going to come over, lift up their skirts and pull on their tights a bit. I should add, if you're thinking about doing this genius plan, just remember they did actually get caught and completely disqualified from all their exams. University teacher here. Undergraduates in the second year of their degree. To be honest, most cheating schemes are incredibly mundane and repetitive. Year on year, students tend to do the same sorts of stuff, with plagiarism outweighing all other cheating options by about 99%. Incidentally, if anyone's getting ready to start their first semester of university in the next 6 weeks or so, don't plagiarize. It's incredibly easy to detect with modern software, and almost always ruins your grade. Asterisk. Edit. To the many people saying you can just get around it by downloading the software and paraphrasing sources instead of copying, etc. That's not a way to beat the system. That is literally what we're teaching you to do. It's called research. Took a music class and we had to memorize jazz music and pick the era and name of the musician. My friend loved jazz and already knew all the information. He could have taught the class, and he was the one that convinced us to take it. Well, after our first exam, We got C's and he got an A+. We had to come up with a way to survive. So we told him to use feet commands. And I would sit on one side of him and our other friend would sit on the other side. If he spread his feet like that was A. That was B. That was C and it was D. Worked amazingly well. We all got A's from then on. For my midterms and finals, I'd give each student a 3x5 note card which they could use one side to write anything they wanted. In the real world, anyone can look up things like equations. So I figured it was fair. After all, I wanted to make sure they knew the operations. Incidentally, every year, the vast majority of students would say, after I copied all the notes on the card, I could remember them and didn't even need it. Until one year a student came in with his card having the tiniest handwriting I ever saw. I couldn't read it. Turns out he was wearing both contacts and his glasses, giving a major magnification effect, or so he told me years later. In high school a few times I would get purposefully caught not cheating. I would make it look like I was reading something hidden in my hand and inevitably the teacher would come over and inspect to not find anything. After that it was fair game. The teacher wouldn't check me again because she was embarrassed about falsely accusing me before. University of Florida circa 1985. Once a final began, the answers were posted across campus so you could grade your final and figure your grade. One fraternity had their pledges get the answers. They then used a Mr. microphone to broadcast them to brothers via FM Walkmans. This story couldn't be more circa 1985. There was a similar thread before this that I can't find, but this was one of my favorite schemes from that thread. A student successfully obtains the answer key to a test. The student then makes a bracelet with beads, with colored beads corresponding with to letters. So if the answers on a test went ADCBAD, the bracelet might have a black bead to indicate the start, but then a red bead for A, a green bead for D, a blue bead for C, a yellow bead for B, another red bead for A, and finally a green bead for D. Unless you know the plan, it looks just like a beaded bracelet. It was not so elaborate, but in my school, these kids would bring in camera pens and would take pictures of the tests, quizzes and later distribute them. The teachers didn't notice the students holding their pens high above their papers until about 2 weeks later. We had some quite oblivious teachers. Edit, spelling. I'm not a teacher, but back in college I learned Norse runes, as well as the Hebrew, Arabic, and Glagolitic alphabets. In a few of my classes where we had to memorize large equations, I would come to the classroom beforehand and write the equations or answers on the board in a random, sloppy manner using a combination of those alphabets, making sure to change the shape just enough to not make it immediately recognizable as the equations or answers. The best part of that is even if the professor saw it and realized what it was, there was nobody to pin it to, since it was there on the blackboard in front of everyone. There was one class at a school near me that is famous all across the state, because in one exam the entire front of the room raised their hand to distract the exam supervisors so the back of the room could discuss questions. Then vice versa. Worked for them, too. Since No Child Left Behind went into effect, cheating by teachers on behalf of students would have to be the most elaborate cheating scheme I've stumbled upon. I've read of one scheme where a couple of band students got a copy of another class's multiple choice test. They put all of the correct answers into sheet music. They just made sure that paper was on top when they had to clear their desks. Programmable TI-86. My calculus professor didn't know what a TI-Inspire was, or that it had a note-taking feature. I felt clever until he let a girl use her iPhone as a calculator on the final. TA for a college class here. Girl got caught plagiarizing an online blog entry. Claimed it was a copycat virus that her computer had gotten and that it was being repaired and wouldn't happen again. When asked for proof, a response was given by a tech company that wasn't listed in the phone book and was using a Gmail account. When asked for a phone call, the technician said he would call when we was back from his vacation. He never called. So the academic dishonesty claim against the girl was escalated to the next level. The next day, we got an email forwarded from the wife of the technician to the student, with the wife claiming her husband had died of a heart attack coming back from vacation and that there was no way to access his client records. When we asked the student for the technician's name, she couldn't give it to us. And when we said we could not verify her story without a name obituary, we would proceed with the case. The next day, the local paper ran an obituary that she screenshotted and sent to us about a man who had died on vacation, with his body being donated to science. It was about 6 lines long and did not mention anything about family, funeral arrangements, etc. The newspaper was called to see if they would tell us who paid for it, which they originally would not. But once we explained the situation, they said if we could give the name of the person we suspected, they would give us a yes or no answer as to if they paid for the obituary or not. Turns out it was the student. TL. Doctor student got caught plagiarizing. Blamed it on the virus. Then invented and held off a computer technician to try to cover her tracks. I have kind of a cheating inception story. I had a CS professor who gave us a completely brutal take-home final exam. Much harder than the work we had been exposed to previously in class. And it was worth like 30% of the final grade. In desperation, I googled one of the questions to see if I could find any forum posts on similar problems. Instead, I ended up finding out that the teacher had lifted the final in its entirety from another university's website. That website also provided the answers to the questions, which I then lifted. I'm pretty sure the professor knew what I did, but couldn't call me out without exposing that she had lifted the exam from elsewhere, rather than writing it like she was supposed to. I haven't worked on a class large enough, but I've heard Televination Flying V. The name suggests it's more common among groups of students from countries with looser academic honesty codes. The smartest student sits in the front row of the auditorium. 2 more sit in the next row up to the left and right of the smartest. So as the smartest student answers questions, the dumber students sitting in a sight line can pass the answers back up the row. I wasn't a teacher, merely a student. But there were old tests and quizzes floating around from the previous years. Problem with the class was, those tests were the exact same as were the quizzes. It took her a good 2 months before she found out what was wrong. Suddenly, kids started dropping out of the class. Someone once posted to Reddit, collected dozens of stories of successful and unsuccessful elaborate cheating schemes, and used those to create the perfect cheating plan. In German class, most of our tests were vocabulary terms. My friends and I sat near the wall where there was a bulletin board. He would disguise the answers as a lunch menu or some other legit looking paperwork. 2 people sat next to each other in my professor's earlier algebra course. A boy and a girl. The girl would sit her purse in front of her, take a picture of her test, then message it out to someone. She would make it look like she was working to avoid suspicion until her friends messaged her back with a picture of the exam. She and her boyfriend, or whatever he was, would then complete the exam, turn it in, get perfect scores. Being in college, some people don't like getting cheated out of their money. So someone in a row behind them alerted the professor. Professor separated the 2. Instituted a new rule banning unneeded materials from your desk, and kept a closer eye on them. The guy continued to get perfect scores, while the girl failed miserably and had to retake the class. I once forgot I had a major project due in high school. I got to class early and threw some sheet together. Class started and the teacher collected the assignment. Then during class, instead of taking notes, I started the assignment again. But this time had the entire class to work on it. After the class was over, I walked out and stood around waiting for the teacher to leave. I went back in and switched the assignment I did in 5 minutes with the one I had been working on all class. I got an A and didn't get caught. Current teacher that has seen plenty of cheating. I've yet to have a student top mine from college. Had a monster paper due during my masters. I only got her about a third of the way done, so I printed it out and proceeded to throw it on the ground and step all over it. After class, I gave the paper to the department secretary and claimed I saw it outside and recognized the professor's name on it. I hightailed it out of there before the prof could make it downstairs to claim it. 5 minutes later I got a call apologizing for the paper falling out of her stack and asking if I could bring in a new copy on Monday. Got an A. I once caught someone copying their paper from 4 websites rather than just copying one. Airtight plan. I used to get my homework done by telling one group that I would do the first 6 questions while they do the last 6 questions. And then telling a different group that I would do the last 6 questions while they do the first 6 questions. When both groups were done, I would give my half to each of them and would just have to paraphrase all 12. Cheat the teachers and your classmates. Not really cheating. But in my freshman science class, if someone important, principal, dead, superintendent, came to sit in on my teacher, he would warn us ahead of time. If he asked a question and you did not know it, you rose your right hand. If you knew a question and did know it, you rose your left hand. That way it would appear to the person sitting in that everyone knew it and he was doing a good job as a teacher. Lols. I let someone copy off me once, but my handwriting is so bad she wrote some Y's in place of 4's. The teacher caught on to the most elaborate by default cheating scheme I have ever done by marking the incorrectly transcribed problems wrong and leaving a really snarly note on her papers. 52/54. Next time you copy, make sure you can read the person's handwriting.